check out our streaming schedule for this week. We've got tons of content in terms of the NFL and college football, as we're going live just about every single day this week. So make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single moment where we go live. And now, on with our feature presentation. If any of you follow the NBA, yesterday was a weird day in terms of the broadcasting schedule. Every Thursday, TNT has a doubleheader, with one game starting at 7:30 Eastern, and the other game starting around 10 o'clock Eastern. The TNT Thursday night doubleheader is arguably the marquee window for the NBA all week. And for the first game of yesterday's doubleheader, we were scheduled to have the Milwaukee Bucks take on the Miami Heat. Now, the game itself ended up happening, and the Bucks won rather convincingly, taking it by a final score of 125-96. If you want to know how this game went, Damian Lillard scored 6 points in 1 second. It was just a really ugly game for the Heat where the outcome was never in doubt. When one team turns the ball over just 6 times, shoots 47% from the field, and shoots 45% from 3, and the other team loses the turnover margin by 4, shoots 23% from 3, and shoots 37% from the field, you know how the game is going to go. However, what was bizarre about this game was the fact that it did not start on time. Instead of starting at 7:30, the game started at 8:30, because the game was pushed back by an hour. This was a super late announcement, only being announced 2 hours prior to the originally scheduled tip-off. But the reason for this, as you might have been able to guess, was snowstorm related. The Bucks were having trouble getting out of New Orleans because New Orleans was underneath a foot of snow and was icy. And because of the delays with flying, forcing the team to be stuck inside the hotel, the Bucks couldn't get to the arena on time, flying out of New Orleans on Thursday morning to make it to the arena to be able to play the game, which the Bucks didn't want to postpone because of their already congested schedule. The decision worked out, and the Bucks won handily, but this game will live on in NBA history for the bizarre delay involved. And if you want to know more about some other weird scheduling conflicts, like the one we're going to talk about in today's video, then this is the place for you, because we talk about all things NFL history all the time with a new video and a new live stream every single day. We even stream some basketball if you guys like that. So if you like that sort of stuff, be sure to hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. Thanks in advance for your support as we try and hit 70,000 subscribers. However, you're probably asking the obvious question right now. Why the heck am I talking about this game right here? Why am I talking about an NBA game that got delayed by an hour? Isn't this an NFL channel? Well, because this isn't the first time in Milwaukee Bucks history that a home game of theirs got delayed by an hour. Although the one in our story has nothing to do with the weather, and instead has everything to do with the almighty juggernaut known as the National Football League. Because if you ever wondered just how much bigger the NFL is than the NBA, and just how much of a powerhouse the National Football League is, look no further than what took place at the 1996 NFC Championship, when the Milwaukee Bucks decided to cave in for some reason in a story that deserves a deep dive today. Because this is the story behind the controversy involving the 1997 Milwaukee Bucks and the NFC Championship. Before I talk about the actual incident in question and just what all the chaos was, we need some context to understand the NFL game on the agenda, as in, the most important game in the state of Wisconsin at the time. It's January 12th, 1997, and we find ourselves at Lambeau Field for the biggest game of the Green Bay Packers that played in nearly 3 decades, as they host the Carolina Panthers for a trip to Super Bowl 31. It's an expansion team in its second season against one of the greatest teams ever assembled, with the number 1 offense and the number 1 defense in the league, and with an MVP quarterback in Brett Favre. Win this game, and for the first time since the 1967 season, you're going on to the Super Bowl and can bring the Vince Lombardi Trophy back to its rightful home. And sure enough, as you might be able to tell, that's exactly what the Packers were able to do. As during this 11:30 a.m. Central game, Green Bay was able to take care of business as 12-point favorites and win by a final score of 30-13, with the Packers going to their 3rd Super Bowl in franchise history. I've talked about this game before in a previous video of mine, so if you want to learn more about that, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. However, This game was total domination on the part of Green Bay, who scored 30 of the final 36 points once the second quarter began. Green Bay nearly doubled Carolina's first down output, winning that battle 22-12. Green Bay nearly quintupled Carolina's rushing output, winning that battle 201-45. Green Bay nearly doubled Carolina's yardage output, winning that battle 497-251. And Green Bay won the turnover battle, which always bodes well, especially on a day where Favre threw for just under 300 yards and had a passer rating of 107.3, nearly double that of Kerry Collins on the opposite side. Despite the fact that Green Bay was freezing with a wind chill of -16, no one was feeling cold inside watching their Packers get back to the promised land for the first time in nearly 3 decades. The Packers were on top of the NFC and were 1 game away from ultimate glory. But this win by the Packers that you're watching was not the only game taking place in the state of Wisconsin involving a pro sports team. Because 6.5 hours after the Packer game was starting, another game was taking place. This time, the game was in the NBA, and it was at the Bradley Center in Milwaukee, where the Bucks were taking on the Golden State Warriors, in a game that the Bucks, who had recently lost 5 straight, desperately needed to win to get back above 500. But even though this NBA game was taking place well into the night, and well after the sun had set, and was taking place in a completely different city, it was still posing major problems for the Bucks, considering the NFL game taking place in the early afternoon back in Green Bay. Now you might be wondering, what the heck is the big deal? The Packers game is starting at 11:30 a.m. Central Time, and the Bucks game is starting at 6 o'clock. No football game takes 6.5 hours to complete. There should be no conflict whatsoever. The Packers game will take 3 hours, so it will be done by 2:30, a whopping 3.5 hours before tip-off of the Bucks-Warriors game. This is like saying I can't go to your 4th of July party where you're going to watch the fireworks at night because I'm going to the Yankee game at 1 o'clock. Or like saying if you live in Hawaii that I can't go to your New Year's Eve party because I'm watching my team play in the Fiesta Bowl. In theory, the conflict should be completely and utterly non-existent, especially seeing as the Packers and Bucks play in 2 separate cities. However, you have to remember that there were many people from Milwaukee who were season ticket holders. The Packers have a strong base in Milwaukee. They play games there for more than half a century up until 1994. You can learn more about the Milwaukee Faithful by clicking the card in the upper right corner. In other words, you were going to have people who possibly had tickets to the Bucks game, but also had tickets to the NFC Championship to watch their Packers play in what was a much bigger game. And if we think about those fans, then maybe this conflict is pushing it a little bit. We're going to assume that the game is done by 2:30. Let's say the Packers win the game, so the fans will stay for the trophy ceremony. We'll say that's done by 3 o'clock, just to be super conservative. Then, getting out of the stadium is probably going to be a nightmare, between walking to your car and starting it up and getting through all the traffic, since Lambeau Field is basically in a residential area. Let's say, especially if the roads are bad, it takes an hour just to get out of the venue. Now it's 4 o'clock, and it's roughly 2 hours to go from Green Bay to Milwaukee. By the time you get to the arena, it's 6 o'clock, and that's not counting the time it takes to park your car and enter and find your seat and buy concessions. If you wanted to get to the arena after this game right here, you're probably looking at 6:20, which is way after the game has started. Now, how many fans were going to double dip and try to attend both the Packers game and the Bucks game, I'm not sure. But it was a noticeable enough concern that the Bucks sensed that this could be troublesome. So the Bucks decided that they were not going to take any chances. And in an effort to increase butts in the seats, and maybe encourage some locals to come who would have stayed behind with a 6 o'clock local start time in order to watch the NFC Championship, that they were going to move the game back an hour to 7 o'clock. They were bowing down to the NFL and were letting the NFL dictate their schedule. As the vice president of business operations for the Bucks said on this time change will give fans more flexibility to attend and follow both games. In other words, if you want to go to the Packers game in the early afternoon and the Bucks game at night, but were wondering if this was logistically possible to pull off without stressing or missing a moment of the action, well, we just made it that much easier. Heck, if you want to stay at home after the NFC Championship and watch the AFC Championship and then come over to the arena, since that game will be done by 6 o'clock barring a delay in that game, like, I don't know, the power going out midway through as a field goal is being attempted for some reason, you can now do that. You've got options. We recognize that the NFL is, well, the NFL. And we're not going to interfere with that. Not when the Packers are doing what they're doing. Not when the Packers have a chance to go to the Super Bowl. And with that, the Bucks-Warriors game was moved from 6 to 7. The NFL had won once again, even though there were no NFL games taking place at the same time. And if you're wondering what happened after the game between these two teams behind me right here, when it came to that Bucks-Warriors game, the Bucks won pretty handily, taking it 111-93 on a day where Ray Allen had 22 points. So if you were a fan of the Wisconsin pro sports teams, you got to see your Packers make it to the Super Bowl for the first time in nearly 3 decades, and you got to see the Bucks get above 500 and win by 18 over the Warriors. That's a pretty good day if I do say so myself. Now, did this work from an attendance standpoint? Well, not quite. Yes, the time got pushed back from 6 to 7 o'clock Central because they wanted to have people attend both games, or even allow people to watch the AFC Championship, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, to see whether the Green Bay Packers would play the New England Patriots or the Jacksonville Jaguars at Super Bowl 31. However, this strategy did not work out at all, as the game between the Bucks and the Warriors only drew a hair above 13,000 fans, making it one of their lowest attended games of the season. Keep in mind the team average for the Bucks that year was well above 15,000. So to get 13,000 on a weekend, especially seeing as the previous game on a weeknight drew just a hair under 19,000 fans, yeah, I think a lot of people didn't want to go to a Bucks game after watching the Packers play. This is one of those situations where even though it might not have worked out for the Bucks from an attendance boost standpoint, there was no harm, no foul. An hour delay on a Sunday night from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock isn't going to be the end of the world for a lot of people, especially seeing as games started 7 o'clock or later on weeknights and work nights all the time. And if it was an inconvenience, there were fewer people inconvenienced than people who benefited from this. Whether it meant they could watch both conference championships, or even be bold enough to go to the Packer game in Green Bay and then drive back to Milwaukee for the Bucks game. Either way, the fact that the Bucks moved the game back, despite it not even conflicting directly with the NFC Championship, and despite there being a 6.5-hour difference between start times, shows you just how powerful the Packers are in Wisconsin, and just how powerful the National Football League is across the country. It trumps the NBA in just about every metric. Because when it came to the Bucks playing on Sunday at their originally scheduled time, the Bucks stopped there. Be sure to like and subscribe if you have not done so already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and check out my other channels, JG8 for the history of college football, JG7 for the history of baseball, and JG9 News, where we talk about all things happening in the NFL. Join me every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we'll play live NFL trivia for cash prizes. And make sure to join me live, as we're on stream just about every single day. And thanks to all our Patreon members and our YouTube members for helping out the channel. See how you become a member and show your support financially in the description down below.